everyone. Welcome to the Hey CTO podcast. I'm Pedro Torres.
And I'm Sara Gonçalves.
And this is a space where you can get to know a little bit better the members of the CTO Portugal community. Today, our guest is Glyn Roberts. Glyn, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. It's a real pleasure to have you on today's episode.
Yeah, it's great to be here and great to talk to you again, Pedro.
No, for sure. Thank you. So, Glyn, I definitely know you quite well, and I'm fortunate to say that. But for anyone that is seeing, the episode and doesn't know exactly who Glyn is and how fascinating you are, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been doing lately.
Sure. So I'm Glyn Roberts. Been in the tech industry for about 16 years now. Over that time, I started off as a developer, moving up into leadership positions, head of type roles, some CTO type roles. I spent about a year and a half working in Portugal as well, where we met, and that was some great experience there. And at the moment, I'm currently back in the UK, and I'm working for a digital agency over here.
Oh, nice. 16 years. Wow. And can you tell us a bit more about digital solutions where you are at?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now, I'm in a digital agency, so we have about 3,000 developers on our books. So the majority of our developers are based in Belarus, but we do have a dev shop in Poland, and we're currently setting one up in Ukraine, and we're looking at, Uzbekistan and areas like that as further growth for us. And yes, essentially, my role is very varied with the type of role. It's very client facing. So I'm talking with organizations that have got problems with, some staffing needs. So we can provide staff augmentation. I support with project-based work with like trying to do the planning stages and understand where they're trying to get to. We do technical assessment workshops, penetration testing. And we also have a last offering as well, which is leadership as a service. So with this, and I have a team of technical directors underneath me as well. So this is to help organizations that maybe don't have a CTO, or they've left recently, or have never had a CTO, and they don't know how to organize their team and a way to move forward. Are they choosing the right technical stack? Are they doing things in the optimal way for their business? This is another type of offering that we do. So my time is very much spent between pre-sales, talk to a lot of very early stage startups. Some of them are Series A, some of them are Series D. We range from like ClassPass, Forex.com, all the way through to like very napkin idea stages, or just first round of seed funding. So it's a very broad area that I have to cover at the moment. So it's very exciting.
No, it is for sure. And tell me one thing. You just mentioned so many different locations, and how challenging is that? Because at least from the top of my head, you mentioned at least like 4 different time zones, and so how is the coordination of all that for you?
So from a client list, the majority of our clients are UK, European, or US based. For the majority of the clients that I help support, they're mainly UK or European based. So the time zone difference isn't really that much between Poland and Belarus. You're only looking at 3 hours at the moment. In British summertime, it's only 2 hours. So it's not that large a time difference. So they just get started earlier, and there's still a big crossover time. For the US markets, if you're on from New York side of things, you still get several hours crossover. San Francisco time, very little. People are starting early or working late to try and make that time zone difference there. But from internals perspective, it's only like 2-3 hours difference between all these countries that we're in at the moment. So it's not that big a deal for the majority of the clients that I work with. And still in this type of industry, a lot of large organizations actually want to try and follow the sun. They want to have development teams working all around the clock. So they may have an Asian-based agency they're working with, a locally based US team, and then, the Belarus office or Polish office for the European time zone standpoint as well.
Oh, super interesting. Fascinating, for sure. And just like you mentioned, Glyn, we've actually met in Portugal, right? So definitely you've stayed here for quite a long time. So how did that opportunity appear, right? So from the UK. I know that your accent won't let you lie. And so how did you end up in Portugal? And what drove you here? Right? What was the rationale? Do you still remember that?
Yeah, it's very interesting. The first interest in Portugal was about 2 years before I actually moved over. I got headhunted by uni places. So there was like a head of development role going on at the time. One of their recruiters reached out to me, so I started going through the process there, thinking this is quite interesting. So that was the first time I started really looking at Portugal as a serious opportunity for me to actually go live and work there. I didn't get the role. But essentially that sort of laid the seed in my mind as it grew over the next couple of years to go, do you know what, that living in Portugal would be amazing, you know, the Silicon Beach that we call it. And, you know, what Portugal does as a country, trying to really promote technical capabilities and obviously be a serious player in the space. And obviously being on the same time zone as the UK gives a lot of benefits as well.
Yes.
So from that perspective, that was the first seed. And then because I didn't get that role, I had another CTO role in the UK instead at that point. And then, when that was sort of winding up for me personally, it's just like, right, okay, talk to my partner. It's like, should we move to Portugal this time then? So at that point, I then made a serious commitment. I started applying for roles in Portugal, talked to several organizations, and essentially Imagery Cloud is where I ended up, which is, again, a web development agency based in Lisbon, and I think Coimbra as well now. So, I think they've been scaling too since I've left. Essentially, the hardest challenge about trying to do that move wasn't actually the moving piece. That was relatively straightforward. It's just understanding what wage I should ask for. So, over on this side in the UK, a lot of the jobs that are advertised always have salary ranges next to them. So it's quite easy to see what salary range you should expect for certain type of role positions. But in Portugal, you guys don't do any of that. So, when I was having these conversations, so what are your salary expectations? It's like, I've got no idea, essentially just you tell me what the market rate is, and that's what I'm looking for. So that was the only really challenging part, to be honest. Everything else is super simple. Obviously, the transport links for flying from the UK over to Lisbon is super easy. Then obviously once I was there, Imagery Cloud took very good care of me, made sure that I was looked after, understood how to deal with the tax, the government piece, and all the stuff there, made me feel very welcome. So it was an amazing experience while I was out there. And the only reason why I really left was because my partner was struggling, because she's not in the tech space. I think it's much harder for non-Portuguese people to work in other industries in Portugal. I didn't have any troubles at all in the tech space. Everyone's able to speak English. There was great opportunities all around. So, I would have stayed if I was a single guy. But just with the partner, she was able to get roles and jobs, but nothing that was in her interest or in the specialist area that she was trying to work in, which is why we ended up moving back to the UK, unfortunately.
So sad. We are not lucky. We were not lucky enough to keep you staying here.
But you can't get rid of me, it seems. So,
yeah. Well, and I did something. So I just scrolled through your LinkedIn profile, and I noticed that at some point on time, you were the founder of a company named Zappit. I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. And I'm curious, how does that moment came to your life that you felt that vibe of being an entrepreneur and found your own company? How did that happen?
Sure. So I was working as a developer in web development companies again. A lot of my career is in web development. I have moved to some product-based organizations as well. But at this time, I had done about 3.5 years in Liverpool as a web developer, moved over to London, done about another 2 years as a senior web developer. And then I took a little break from work just like a sabbatical. So just to like reassess what I wanted to do with my life. And then when I came back to the same job. So, I still hadn't, lost my job during this time, which is great. And then, the mindset had already been gone in, say, well, I want to do something for myself. I want to do something where I've, can be exposed to more things. Trying to follow just the standard working career path is quite a slow process. I just want to get in there. You're young, you've got lots of free time. You can spend the hours working late. So I teamed up with one of the sales guys in the company that I worked with, and we decided to start this project, which was Zappit, which is just an out-of-home marketing solution. So at the time, NFC was just becoming a thing. The fact that mobile phones are actually starting to support NFC, only on Android at the time. We just built an out-of-home web platform for this. So essentially on bus shelters with QR codes and NFC and Bluetooth on there, so you can connect with posters that you see out on the street, and things like real estate with the for sale signs, things like that. So for the first 4 weeks, I actually built the whole platform from scratch by myself, managed to get like an MVP, a working version out, and start having some of our customers use it, which is fantastic. There were a lot of challenges after that point. So, at this stage, we had some angel funding that was interested in us. They say, right, okay, you can come to our offices, quit your jobs, we'll give you a term sheet in a bit, and, can move forward. So I quit my job, did 2 or 3 months there, and the term sheet came through, and it was terrible. So at that point, you go, okay, we can't agree this. This is terrible. You know, it wasn't even investment; it was a loan. They were taking a very large portion of the business. It's like, this isn't a fair deal. So we walked away. And so at that point, it's just still me and him working from our own bedrooms for like the next 8 months until we managed to get proper angel funding, got valued at 1.1 million at that point. So we're able to set up properly, you know, create an office, start hiring a team, and start running it like a real business. And yeah, essentially the experience you get from that is amazing, where the buck stops with you. You know, I'm the only technical person in the business. I avoided the CTO role for as long as I could do. I think it was about 2.5 years before I officially took the CTO role. Just called myself lead developer. And the only reason I did at that point is because the guy underneath me needed a promotion, and there was nowhere to promote him to. So it's just like, okay, I tell you what, I'm going to take the CTO role, and you can have the head of role. There we go. So, you know, the whole, you know, inferiority complex issues cropping up there. But, you know, essentially just a very small team running with that. And you just think in a different way once you start doing that. You know that it's your business. You start thinking like a business owner. So, you know, what you used to see in the past and used to annoy you no longer does, because you understand it from the other side of the path of what your bosses are thinking, what your managers are thinking. You know, as a developer, we want the cleanest code. We want it perfect. We want, you know, and we don't care that it takes 2 years to build. Whereas a business owner, you want it done in 3 or 4 weeks so you can get it out there, get it to market, and start bringing in revenue. So yeah, it was, you know, fantastic experience. That business is still going on today. I mean, I stepped away just because it sort of plateaued a little bit. And at that stage, I think it's still running at this point, but I haven't got an active stake. I'm not actively working in that business anymore. But, you know, fantastic experience to do that and be able to do it in your free time, you know, evenings and weekends, to start the business, to get to a point where you can actually get funding and actually make it a career choice for you.
I'm curious about something. Why did you run away from the CTO role?
It's interesting. Now that I'm more experienced and have had proper CTO roles, I shouldn't have done. I should have, you know, just said, right, I'm the CTO in this organization. But back then, you know, the mindset was, if you're a CTO, you're managing teams of teams, you're managing multiple people, you're a larger organization, you're not doing hands-on day-to-day coding, you are doing board level conversations on a regular basis, you're looking at acquisitions. You know, the expectation of the CTO role, for me and in my perception at that time, was that I wasn't really doing a CTO job. Though the CTO role, I think, has changed quite a lot. There's a lot of variation to CTO roles that exist now, and the startup CTO is a thing. You know, it is a real role. Yes, if you only like 2 or 3 developers in your organization, you're probably still hands-on and doing some coding, but you are still the top leader in the organization, making the technical choices and decision making for how the platform moves forward. So yeah, back then it was more of a case of I didn't feel comfortable taking the CTO role. I was trying to avoid it, at which point and then, you know, I just had to suck it up and go, okay, I'm the CTO now, just because I need to promote the guy underneath me into a better position so I can keep him in the business.
No, fantastic. Tell me one thing. So one thing that I truly believe is that the best software engineers were previously engineer managers, you know, so you have like a software engineer, becomes a manager, he has the manager experience, he returns to software engineering. And what I usually find is that they are much more complete. Why? Because they, just like you mentioned, they have the point of view of the manager, they are still in the technical, they are super relevant. And I really see them as very complete professionally speaking. You know, you were working for companies, you then became a founder, entrepreneur, you're now back in the game of working for, you know, for someone else. Do you see that, you know, the Zapit experience kind of, you know, really had a big influence on your rest of your career, and you saw kind of how much more complete you are as a professional right now, or it didn't affect you that much?
I think it made a huge impact on me. Firstly, when it goes to interview stages, when you have been interviewing a lot of developers, you now know how to answer questions properly. You know what the interviewer is looking for because you were looking for the same thing. So at this stage, whenever I go into an interview situation, I don't feel stressed. I don't feel annoyed. I just sit back and it's just a conversation, just like you and me are doing here now. It's just a conversation, and you don't get worried about what is that the right answer or not. It's, you know, you can understand both sides of the field, and you can just talk about whatever technology, whatever problems that they're having, and what the potential solutions are around them. And then when you actually come to doing the day-to-day job, absolutely, because, you know, some managers that aren't able to articulate why something's important, why something needs to be a priority, why you need to stop what you're doing, you understand exactly why that is the case now. So therefore, yeah, as you know, I completely understand. You have empathy for the people around you, for the management level. I was talking at CTO Craft Con last week, actually, around this piece, going that, you know, even though that the leadership path isn't for everybody, for developers, you do have the valid capability now to stay in the technology sector as a hands-on individual contributor, and you can get paid very well for this. I still think every developer should have some form of leadership requirement as part of their job, just so you do some exposure to that, just so they can understand whether that is the right path for them or not. But even if it's not, they then have empathy for understanding that the manager's job is hard. Managing people can be really horrible. So at least by having that experience firsthand, they will then take it easier on their manager when they're getting annoyed that, you know, I haven't got the time to write perfect code. You know, there's not always going to be tests because you want this out the door now. You know, as long as they understand that, that's fine. You know, essentially we can come back to this, or it's on you if this is you know, if this falls over, because I've told you I'll get the functionality working, but there could be bugs because I can't go through the normal process that I would do if I'm doing this in a fast way. So yeah, it completely realigns the way that you think about development and the way that you think about working in an organization. And yeah, so you know, even if you don't do it full time, you just do it on the side, you know, having that exposure, I think is really valuable to any developer.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and so far you already assumed the CTO role sometimes. Do you see from each company it was very different? Did you took like lessons from one to another?
Every role I've had since my first CTO role is a completely different role, and that, you know, this is for two reasons. One is I try and make sure I pick a different type of role to what I've done previously, so I keep on extending, I keep on, you know, learning new things and moving in the right way. But also, secondly, the CEO, the person above you, they're very, very different types of people. You'll have some CEOs that are very controlling, want to be micromanaging, and you spend a lot of your time managing upwards, persuading them of what to do. You'll have other CEOs that are very laid back and say, look, this is your job, you do it, and you don't have any pushback upwards, and you just get to manage everything downwards very easily. And then you've got the CEO that is all over the place, you know, saying, I need this, you know, just like, you know, they don't stick to a plan. You talk to them, you agree to a plan, and then next week, oh no, that's not the top priority more, that needs to change. So again, it's a very different type of way of working. You know, the managing people part isn't that much different, I think, in any of the roles that I go to. Even when I moved to Portugal, you know, developers are developers. They're very similar in the mindsets. You know, obviously you've got some great skills over there. You know, the only real difference I see is that Portuguese developers are less willing to keep on job hopping than they do in the UK. In the UK, 2 years is a very long time to be in an organization, where in Portugal, I think just with your history and culture, developers stay inside of the same organization for a longer period of time. But everything else, I think, is very similar. You know, everyone wants to progress. They want a career framework. They want to know how they can get better, how they can move forward. So that part of the role, I haven't personally seen anything different. Even when I'm trying to manage the Belarus developers or the Polish developers over on our side, their direction and where they want to go is always, you know, is always the same.
Oh, fantastic. One thing that you mentioned, so, you know, developers and how they are quite similar, and, you know, one thing that, you know, a lot of developers can actually kind of create is a high performing team. I'm pretty sure that it's not because all of them are great developers. So definitely, I at least I have this belief, you know, that to have a great team, you don't need to have great individual contributors, but actually I actually kind of, you know, I rely a lot on the mix, on the team dynamic. And that's actually one of your passions as well, right? Kind of, you know, the high performing teams, and obviously now from your experience, distributed, which I think that is even more challenging. Knowing that we are pretty much talking about one of the holy grails of software engineering, right? High performing teams. From your experience, Glyn, what do you see that can actually make a difference for a team to become a high performing team?
Sure. So first is the expectations of the organization, because each organization needs different things. Some are, let's say, early stage startups, and they just want to be fast. You know, you don't need the same level of testing or stability in the platform. They want to get new products out, get them working, and seeing if that's, you know, if that's taken a bite with the industry and whether it's going to be successful. Then you've got the larger corporations that need everything to be stable. lots of testing, lots of QA, lots of protection, safety nets in place. And then some are more about innovation. Okay, you know, what's the latest technology stack? All right, you know, we need to do some blockchain now because that's what everyone's talking about. And I promise the investors that's what we're building on now. And then you've got like the data-driven, lean, agile approach where, you know, we just want to build things quick, have lots of measurements coming out and be able to identify successful failures. So, you know, what the business needs is the most important thing to clarify to the developers, because it's amazing how many times you talk to developers and they've got no idea. You know, it's just like I get given this ticket and then I get given this ticket and they don't understand the overall context or why this is so important to them. Then, you know, as you say about what role is most important, you know, with what type of level. Some of our clients come to us and say, right, I want 20 lead developers. I want them all to be professional speakers. I want them all to have PhDs. I want, you know, I want, you know, this type of thing. And, you know, I'm just sitting there saying, look, that's not what you want. That's going to be a terrible team for you. You're going to have 20 cooks all disagreeing of the right way of optimally building the serverless function or something like that. That's not what you need to actually deliver anything valuable for the business. I've only had one case where it's been that extreme, but, you know, you do get some of that. So you're absolutely right. It's about the mixture and of the team as a whole. So, you know, you want, you know, with the type of teams that we do, especially for staff augmentation, saying you want one team lead, you know, the most experienced technical person in that team to be sort of driving decision making, obviously still have that leadership piece where they're understanding from, you know, even the juniors what their thoughts are and different ways of approaching solutions. Then you've got, you know, more senior mids and even like 1 or 2 juniors inside a squad can actually be really beneficial because they can do all the stuff that the seniors don't want to be doing. They don't want to be writing basic tests, or they don't want to be messing around with CSS, or, you know, so, you know, fixing some random Java function that's broken or something like that. You know, by having a well-rounded team where everybody is being able to be exposed to the whole thing, and obviously everyone's learning off each other and able to move forward, that firstly builds a nice team atmosphere where you are actually feeling like you're all in this together. You're all in this little squad trying to, you know, make progress and deliver from that standpoint. And then from high performance, they're the ones that know what's going wrong. They know exactly why things are not being delivered on time, or why there's more bugs in the system or something like this. So that's why blameless retrospectives are so important. You know, they need to have a feeling of trust. They know that they can come out and say, okay, yes, this big bug hit production. You know, this is because I did that, you know, because I had to fit this in, you know, 2 hours at the end of the sprint because I wasn't given proper time to deal with this. I identified it. We said, go ahead anyway, you know, or something like that. It's just about making sure the rest of the business understands why issues occur and not putting blame on them. Because essentially any of these issues that do happen is normally on the management. They didn't listen to what the developers told them. They didn't take that seriously. And yes, you know, it's a developer's fault, but it's a manager's responsibility. You know, I've got so many examples of this where even as myself, it was my fault and my responsibility. So in which case it's definitely on me. But in all other cases where, you know, the developers are building things or mistakes happen, you know, we're only human. By feeling confident that you're not going to get sacked or have a hard word, you know, have a strong word told to you because something went wrong. Then you feel comfortable to be able to come out and say, okay, this isn't working, or why are we so slow doing this, and actually be able to allow the team to fix the problems in a safe way. So yeah, essentially there's multiple different things, but each organization is different. You know, with the last offering that we do, when we go into organizations, see the way they work, it's amazing some of the weird stuff that they come out with. It's really crazy. Some of the, and normally comes from the top down. You know, the manager's been in the industry for 30 years, so he's following some old you know, development roadmap and plan that he used to do back then, and it just doesn't work nowadays. And you know, he's wondering why things are going wrong. You know, it's just been able to identify that and allow the team to fix these problems.
Yeah.
No,
yeah, I was going just to ask, with all those challenges that clients brought to you, do you see any difference in these last couple of years with the whole remote work? Have you seen any differences?
Yes, with the whole pandemic piece, more organizations are willing to have distributed workers now. Before, everyone had to be on site in the office every single day. Oh, we can't work with Poland. We can't work with Portugal. They're in a different place. They're not going to be able to sit next to me, and I'm not going to be able to explain it side by side. They've realized that isn't a requirement now. So obviously there is value to being able to see each other now and again, you know, build the rapport with the team, being able to explain certain things, or at least explain the vision of the business. there are a lot of valuable aspects to having at least some on-site meetings. But the majority of the day-to-day work, everyone's got Zoom or Teams or Hangouts. Everybody's got Slack or, one of these other chat systems, working in an asynchronous manner is successful, and the pandemic has proven that. So many organizations have still carried on working. They haven't disappeared because they haven't been able to bring their team all in one place at the same time. Though there is a big push, I know, from a lot of organizations, from a lot of bosses at the moment that want people to come back into the office every day of the week. But I think developers are realizing we don't need to do that. You said it's not possible. Everything will be bad. It's not the case. And the organizations that are forcing 5 days a week in the office, I think, are struggling now, where developers are leaving and they're applying for roles that are either fully remote or at least partially remote. So I think most developers still want to be in the office a little bit, 2 days a week, 3 days a week. But 5 days a week, I just don't think that the majority of them really feel that. There are exceptions. There are people with children or like very noisy pets, and they go, I want to be in the office all the time. I don't like my children. I need to get out. Well, it's not that bad, but they understand there's disruptions all the time, and they're not going to be able to do as good work as they would to in the office. But the majority of people that are able to set up a quiet workspace are able to work more effectively, in those times. And when they do go to the office, it's more focused on meetings, understanding expectations, and, building the rapport rather than having to do work when they're actually on site, because they know they can do more at home.
It's fantastic, because Glyn, it was interesting that I think that what kind of triggered, the last few minutes of the conversation was talking about high-performing teams. But I actually think that we almost ended up talking about high-performing cultures, isn't it? Kind of that probably the case, because at least one of the takeaways that kind of really emerges here to me is, sure, like maybe just thinking about teams, we're actually kind of focusing on the wrong thing, because just like you were saying, if we don't have the right culture for teams to strive, there is no way we are going to be successful, even hiring the Cristiano Ronaldos of this life. Because again, like if you don't have the right context environment to actually become high performing, everything else won't work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I mentioned, Cristiano Ronaldo. So obviously he used to play for Real Madrid, didn't he? And they had the most expensive team going, but they weren't winning the trophies. So they were just getting high-performing individuals, but weren't having a high-performing team. That's a prime example of those types of mistakes you can do in development, where you hire just absolutely rock star developers, but they're only individual rock stars. As a team, they're not providing the value that you can get with a lower, when I say lower, a different type of skill set or different type of experience to still be able to deliver even more value to the organization. So you're right, a good culture will feed back in better results and better returns for the organization, because they're happy, just happy developers in a nice culture. Developers will want to stay longer. You won't have to pay as much recruitment fees. You won't have to deal with, all the management overheads of saying, I don't like him, or anything like that. You get to really push forward in a much greater way with actually less cost to the business by enforcing the right culture into the organization.
For sure. Very well. Very well. And tell me one thing, Glyn. One question, that it's kind of related with, I think that what we were talking about here. One person, I attended Web Summit, and one person actually asked me one thing that I would love to get your take. One person asked me from on the audience, okay, so when do you think a CTO should stop coding? And so what would you, I can tell you what I answered, but what would you answer? Like, a question like this out of the blue.
So when you're a manager and as a CTO, if you've only got two people below you, you are a manager. Your job is to enable the team. You're no longer in the position where your output is supposed to be individual in a coding capacity. Your output is what the team below you can deliver. And if you've got 20 people below you, you can output a lot more by focusing on supporting them and enabling them to deliver more than you can just by getting your head down and coding 8 hours a day. So at what point is the right time to make that switch from no longer being hands-on the development standpoint? I would say when you've got 10 developers, you definitely shouldn't be coding anymore, because you've got 10 people to manage. There's no way I could see that you could code effectively, manage the business upwards, manage the direction, make sure the quality is still being kept, make sure the developers understand what they're dealing with the one-on-ones and everything like that. So I'd say 10 is easily at that point, you should probably be stepping away from it. I mean, look, like with me, I still love coding. I still do it. In my weekends, I still code. At the last weekend, I built a smart contract on the Ethereum network just for fun, just to see if I could do it. I built myself an NFT with my picture just to see if I could do it. There's great tutorials online. It's not that difficult, but I still love to keep my hands in it. But in my day-to-day job, absolutely not, because I won't be able to be held responsible for the code, because I'm not going to be available to answer questions, to feedback on PRs or anything like that. So, essentially it's at that point where there is enough work being delivered from the team where you don't have to code and your job is just to enable the team. So I would say 10 is as a maximum, you should definitely no longer be coding. Probably could be a little bit below that to have a comfortable level. So it's very much about your organization, what you're trying to build, whether you've actually built a strong team underneath you that can code without you needing to be watching every move they make and supporting them on a daily basis. If you've got some nice seniority in there, at least 2 seniors that can take over that responsibility, that's ideal.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice answer.
What was your answer, Pedro?
It was a terrible one. So I said something like, in the nutshell, I actually said, you know what? When you become too expensive to code, that's a usually good sign that you should stop coding, right? Because why? Usually a CTO has so many responsibilities, that it's really hard for you to keep up with coding, and definitely means also that you need to be focused on something different. But my previous one was actually, from the moment that the code base can't just fit on your head anymore, so when it's starting to grow to a point that, maybe you were one of the founders, so, you knew pretty much your lovely monolith from the MVP. And then all of a sudden, maybe like you said, you have about 10 developers, everyone writing so much code, and it doesn't fit in your head anymore. That's usually a good sign that you shouldn't be coding anymore, because it would need kind of a big effort to gain context. Probably, you'd be not adding so much value like you would be adding before. And that could even sometimes jeopardize a little bit your relationship with the team, right? Because, like a CTO is a CTO, and, being silly or not, everyone kind of really looks to you like, the person of technology. So all of a sudden, if you write a less perfect PR, if you will, right, people say, holy crap, like my CTO is not writing such a good code, and now how am I going to give feedback to him or to her? I think that it kind of untangles so many kind of, challenges and questions, that definitely when it becomes that sort of kind of, high cognitive load, it's usually a good yardstick to say, you know what, maybe you should kind of invest your time in doing something different besides code, at least on professional level.
You just touched on 2 things there, which are interesting. So the last one you just touched on, saying if you write a bad PR, as a CTO, you don't need to be the best coder in the business. That's not your job anymore. So, absolutely right, essentially. And also your time is so limited, you're going to be writing worse code than anybody else, because you're trying to fit it in a half an hour window when everyone else can think about it for half a day. So yeah, I mean, it's important to be aware that the CTO role doesn't have to be the best coder in the business. You need to be able to talk about code. You need to be able to discuss it and read it. But, you shouldn't, if you were the best coder in the organization and you've been hiring poorly, because you should have better coders underneath you. And then the second point you mentioned there, it's too expensive for me to write code. It's a very valid point. If someone comes to me, say, well, look, I want to do some development. It's like, well, you could hire me, but you're going to be wasting a lot of money. You can get someone half my price, probably less. That's going to be able to write it much better than I can as well. So, I'm not the right person to do that for you. So yeah, great points.
And I'm not a CTO, so I cannot answer like you, but I'm a team lead, and sometimes I struggle that I don't code as much as before. And sometimes I struggle that by stepping away from the code and not being facing the same challenges as the developers. Sometimes I struggle on understanding really their pains, trying to help them. Do you have any tips for someone that can struggle with that, not understanding people's pains
I think if you've ever done the development role, you understand the pains. I think you can identify it. So even let's say, you know, I've gone into roles where I haven't known the programming language that the code base is built in. You know, I haven't had experience, but I understand code. I've written code in the past, and when they're talking to me about caching issues or, you know, like N+1 issues in the code base, some legacy stuff or something like that, I can understand what it is. I can understand how to approach it, and oftentimes it's you know, it's the overall conceptual aspect of solving problems. And in most cases, when you talk to a developer with an issue, with a pain, you just literally let them talk and they solve the problem for you. You know, the amount of times you've probably come across where you just look at it, you know, someone says, oh, I've got a problem. Okay, talk me through it. Oh, I've got it. And you literally say nothing and they've solved the problem themselves just by explaining it to the rubber ducky, you know, the rubber duck.
Yeah.
And yes, essentially, if you're now managing people, you shouldn't be the best coder. So, you know, unless if we're talking about something really, you know, he's talking about race conditions, or you're talking about, you know, a particular language function call, which is going to have, you know, an asynchronous something or other that's causing problems, you know, you don't need to really be part of that conversation. If you're managing the team now, there is an expectation that your ability to code at the same level as the most senior people below you shouldn't be there. And I know there's the whole, you know, can you hold your own in a conversation? Do you still have the respect of the team if they're better coders than you? Again, this is now leadership. This is about being able to say, yes, I can still discuss. And when I disagree with something, you know, you're open to say, look, you guys, you know, I'll often say, you guys are the pros here, but I don't think this approach is right. So let's talk about it. And I'll let them discuss why they think that's the right approach. I'll explain my approach, and we'll come to consensus. In some cases, I'm completely wrong and they are right. And I go, okay, great. You're the right path, guys. You're fine. You know, otherwise they'll come around to my way of thinking and go, okay, actually, I understand what you're saying there. Okay, let me come back to you on this. And they solve it that way. So it's, you know, just trying to make sure that you don't have an ego with the way that you manage people, and you're willing to say, look, you guys are the pros here, but I don't agree for whatever reason why this is the case. Or can you explain to me why you're doing it this way? Should not be seen as a weakness of a leader. It's more of a case of them learning as well of what your view is. And, you know, it could be 50-50 on who's got the better approach. And the most important thing is the right approach is followed. It doesn't matter who was actually got the better approach initially.
Indeed.
Thank you for that.
Very well. So I think that we are kind of, you know, reaching to the end of our lovely chat. You know, but we can't let you go, Glyn, without kind of, you know, asking just kind of a final round of questions, you know, that usually it's like, you know, more interesting or fun, if you will, than what we have been doing so far. And you know, we usually have two questions, typically, sometimes, you know, one, but actually, you know, with you, because of what I've just learned about what you've just said, I actually have one extra question for you, if you don't mind, you know, on this category. That is, you're from Liverpool, right?
I'm from all over, really. I graduated in Liverpool University, and I was working there for about 3-4 years afterwards as well.
Okay. So with that in mind, Liverpool, Everton, or the Beatles?
Well, which is better?
Yeah.
So if you live in Liverpool, the majority of the people that live in Liverpool are Everton supporters. So, you know, well, back in the day when I was living there, anyone that supported Liverpool didn't really live in Liverpool. So Everton was the key local one. It was the same thing in like Manchester. It was, if you live in Manchester, you're all more of a Man City supporter, where Man United supporters are outside of the city. Or the Beatles, you know, obviously the Beatles have got great music, so I can't knock them in any way.
No, cool. Thank you. Great answer. Can you take the next one,
I
Sarah?
will take the next one. So if you could have dinner with anyone in the world, who would that person be?
So, okay, so the most interesting person I think that's out there is Elon Musk. If you see some of the talks that he does, some of the conversations he has, his mind is just crazy. He thinks about all these weird things in so many different ways. You know, it's like, oh, will there ever be life on Mars? It's like, well, we'd have to warm up the planet first. How do you warm up the planet? Oh, we'll drop thermal nuclear missiles on the poles. You know, just like that type of mindset where he just thinks completely out of the box with everything. So if I was having dinner with anyone, that would be super interesting, just to try and keep up with him. You know, you start talking about someone, you go down some random tangent, I'm sure, of things you never even thought of before. So, you know, he would be great. But also, you know, I've always respected comedians. When you see comedians not on stage being funny, but just being interviewed, they're able to articulate things in a way that I'm just so impressed by. You see like the way Ricky Gervais articulates being an atheist. You see the way Russell Brand articulates certain societal issues at the moment. The way that you see them are able to articulate certain points in a way that you already believe. You already have that mindset, but you don't know why, and they're able to articulate how their thoughts got to that point. And it's like, do you know what? That makes an awful lot of sense. So I think for me, the most interesting people for me are those that can articulate aspects which I don't feel I can do in the same way. So I think that's with everyone. I think with everyone, when you have these type of questions, who do you want to be on an island with? Who do you want to have dinner with? They're always trying to find someone that has strengths that they don't, and that's what I find most interesting, really.
Yeah,
very well.
Interesting. Yeah.
To finish, tell us something that most people that hang out with you don't really know, and that you are kind of open to share.
Sure. So exercise, I think, is incredibly important, no matter what role you're in. Especially at the CTO role, I think it's very important that you stay active and you do exercise. There's been times where I've been really bad. I've done 6 months without doing any exercise, and you feel it. You get a little bit of depression. You feel weighed down. You're sleepy. You're not able to focus in the same way. So yeah, for the majority of my career, I've always put a lot of effort and energy towards trying to make sure I'm staying fit and healthy. So with that, I was doing a lot of running. I've run 3 marathons. I've done the Paris, the Prague, and the Bratislava marathon before, so which is great. And also, when I mentioned before about my sabbatical, I actually took 3 months out in Thailand where I was staying at a cage fighting camp. So I was staying at Tiger Muay Thai in Thailand. So, you wake up and twice a day, you're there training in Muay Thai or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or something like that. Amazing experience to just take yourself out of your day-to-day working life, do something different like that, and you come back with a completely different perspective of what really matters and, where your attentions and efforts should be put towards.
Wow. That's
I can relate. Yeah, I can relate to that completely. I'm a bit addicted to exercise as well. And I always feel that for my mind, not just physically, but for my mind, it's crucial because it helps me to think better, to clear out the problems, to help to relativize the problems on the daily basis. And when we put challenges for ourselves, it's also to help us when you have a big challenge in work, start thinking, no, I can do this. It helps you create a mindset that you can bring from sports to our professional life. At least I feel that. I don't know if you also feel that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, since the pandemic's come in, I've made a real effort to be training every morning. So I either do a run or I use the Center app, the one with Chris Hemsworth. I've got just like a pair of dumbbells at home, or just do some type of exercise. Even if it's only 30 minutes, 40 minutes, it's enough to, as you say, get the stress off you so you start to think clearly. And as you say, if I can do that run in that time, I can do this work. I can achieve anything. And it definitely bigs yourself up and builds up your confidence to be able to tackle most situations.
Yeah, completely.
Fantastic. So this is pretty much the end. Glyn, thank you so much for being with us. It was definitely like 40 minutes of awesomeness, and it was great to talk to you and to get your perspective of things, not only in tech but also for sure in life. So thank you so much.
Great to be here, Pedro. Very much enjoyed it.
No, for sure. So, for everyone that is listening to us, thank you everyone for watching. We hope you got some insights and definitely some inspiration. I know that me and Sarah, we definitely did. So we hope to see you again in the next episode of Hey CTO. Thank you, everyone.